Hello everybody, welcome to Snyder's Inc. And today we're going to be reacting to a channel called Savox. Let me tell you say it. If I didn't say it right, my bad. This is going to be a long one. This one is 6 of the most shocking crimes in British history. Now I can't wait to see what these are. However, obviously, probably most likely mature audiences only for this. Ladies and gentlemen, need y'all to hit the like button, hit subscribe button, comment what you think down below. You guys ready? Of course you're ready. Let's go.
The UK is generally not the first country that people think of when they hear the term shocking crimes. I mean, we don't have a lot of mass shootings here like they do in the US.
Yeah, unfortunately, freaking luckily for you, you don't have to worry about mass crime happening every freaking damn week.
Generally don't have lunatics who go around murdering people and filming it on their phones to upload to the internet like the Academy maniacs from Russia, and we don't have those brutal cartel videos like the ones that come out of Central and South America.
No, you just have, no, your crimes are more like Jack the Ripper and shit like that. Because I think that was definitely British, right?
Said, every once in a while, we do get crimes that really end up shocking the public, the type that really make us wonder, how could someone do something like that? And in this video, I'm going to be talking about 6 of those crimes. From children murdering other children to a full-on terror attack in the middle of a London street. Here are 6 of the most shocking crimes in British history.
I'm going to try to pause this as little as possible because it's 49 minutes long. 49 minutes long, so I want to give it its time. But if I gotta say something, I'm gonna say it. Oh, I know this one already.
I can think of no better way to start this list than with a case that shook the UK to its very core, as it showed that there's no minimum age requirement for a human being to be pure evil.
I'm gonna let this play out. I'm just gonna say this. This is one of the most sickening and shocking things I've ever seen. Because I want to be inside these kids' mind to figure out why they did what they did. I can't process it. I can't figure it out. It freaks me up. I'm gonna let this one play out, but I'm just gonna that's all I want to say. This one shakes me to my core.
Evil. On February 12, 1993, Denise Bolger and her 2-year-old son James were out shopping in the Strand shopping centre in Bootle, near Liverpool. Denise would usually have James in a pushchair, or stroller as people in the US call them, but on this day she chose to walk while holding James's hand. This was a decision that she would regret for the rest of her life. At 3:40 p.m, the two went into a butcher's shop, and Denise let go of James's hand to pay for her shopping. A few seconds later, she turned to find that James was gone. She of course began panicking and ran out of the store frantically searching for her son. She found a security guard and described James to him. The guard announced James's name on the speaker in the shopping centre in the hope that James would find his way back to his mother, or that someone would see him and bring him back.
I'm about to say it's a child. I'm sorry, I said I wasn't gonna pause it. I'm sorry. I apologize. But I was just gonna say it's a child who's like, if it's a child that has to be on a stroller and can just walk, he's not gonna just find his way back here because you say his name. That isn't, no, that's not how that's gonna work.
Unfortunately, there was no sign of him. James Bolger had vanished. His disappearance was quickly reported to the police. James Bolger had not simply walked off on his own, however. He had been kidnapped. On the same day that James and Denise visited the Strand Centre, John Venables and Robert Thompson were also there. The two had been shoplifting in various stores in the shopping centre before they suddenly, for reasons that have gone unexplained to this day, decided that they wanted to abduct a child. They spent some time observing their surroundings, looking for potential victims, before they finally saw James and Denise Bolger enter the butcher's. They waited for the right moment, and when Denise let go of James's hand and turned her back, John Venables quickly grabbed his hand and led him out of the shop. What makes the entire situation even more saddening is that Denise had turned left when she ran out of the shop looking for James, while John and Robert had turned right and left the shopping centre with James. If Denise had turned right, she would have seen James being led away and could have stopped them. John Venables and Robert Thompson led James Bolger to a nearby canal. The whole way there, James was crying out for his mother, but John and Robert simply ignored him. At least 35 witnesses saw the three of them, but unfortunately did nothing to stop them. When they reached the canal, the two picked him up and threw him to the ground, causing him to begin crying. James was bruised and bleeding from hitting the ground, and John and Robert put the hood of his coat over his head to hide his injuries and avoid suspicion. The three of them then travelled down a busy street, where Robert Thompson, in full view of passers-by, kicked James in the ribs for crying. Eventually, after being stopped several times by people concerned for the fact that James was crying and managing to slip away, the three of them arrived at an abandoned railroad track.
Okay, see, this is what annoys me. How on earth do you slip away from this? How does when a kid, witnesses saw this kid kick James in the ribs for crying and no one thought to do nothing? This is what freaks me up the most with this. How did no one stop these kids? Now, around the canal, I can understand why no one stopped them when they were walking by, because it's just two kids with another kid. They're not going to think, at that moment, you're not going to look at that situation and think that the kids are going to do what they do to him. Like, you're not going to think anything of it. The kid crying, like, you're not going to think anything of it. You're not going to at least think overly done of it. When you watch him get kicked in the ribs, however, and you do nothing about it, that makes you part of the problem. Because that's a situation where you should have done something about it. You chose not to do nothing about it. And I hope for those people that chose to do nothing about it, when they found out what happened, I hope it's in the back of their head. It's in their conscience for the rest of their life. Because it's not your fault what happened to him happened, but also is for the fact you didn't stop it.
I can't go into detail about what happened next. All I can say is that John and Robert absolutely brutalized James Bolger. In the end, he had suffered 10 skull fractures and 42 injuries on his body in total. They then left his body on a train track, and it was later cut in half when a train rolled over it. 2 days later, James's body was found by children playing nearby, and reports stated that he was most likely already dead before the train had hit him. At first, James's own parents were considered to be suspects. However, the police would later review the CCTV footage and discover the shock.
Can I also just ask why you never did this before? Like, why did it take for the kid to be found and for the parents to be able to be accused before you looked at the footage? Why didn't you just look at the footage first? That'd be the first thing I'd do when he went missing. Huh? Okay. Clearly, I'm just not in the mind of police officers, because I don't think that, I guess my dumb citizen brain thinks the dumb citizen brain thinks to check CCTV footage first. Obviously, you gotta check that last, apparently.
Shocking truth of who had kidnapped and murdered James Bolger. This image is one of the most infamous in British history. It shows James Bolger being led by the hand by an older boy, following behind another one seen in the centre of the image. The truly shocking thing about this image is that the two boys leading James away are in fact only 10 years old. These two boys are John Venables and Robert Thompson. When the CCTV image was shown on the news, one woman instantly recognized John Venables and called the police. The two boys were quickly arrested. Forensics found blue paint on the boys' clothes. James Bolger had blue paint poured into his eyes during his murder, and it matched that which was found on their clothes. They also found traces of blood on the boys' shoes and determined that it was indeed that of James Bolger. Following this, they were formally charged with James's murder. In a police interview, John Venables said, "I did kill him. What about his mom? Will you tell her I'm sorry?" Robert Thompson attempted to deny his involvement, but eventually slipped up when he gave a detailed account of what Venables had been wearing on the day the two of them were seen with James Bolger. 9 months later, the boys' trial began. Outside the courthouse, people called for the blood of the boys. "Kill the bastards. A life for a life," people yelled. Public disgust only intensified when witnesses and the media noted Thompson's cold, seemingly remorseless behavior at trial, especially in comparison to Venables' hysterical outbursts.
There has got to be mental health issues with these boys. There has to be. No normal 10-year-olds think this sickening. Like, there has to be something wrong with these guys. And considering the fact Like, I don't know if they're still alive. I can't see them being alive. But if they are, like, the fact they have never given any explanation and none of us know why just explains how, like, sick in the head they are. There's something wrong with them.
Court-appointed psychiatrists determined that the two boys knew right from wrong and weren't sociopaths, but were nevertheless unable to uncover any concrete motives for James Bulger's murder. Both John Venables and Robert Thompson were convicted, making them the youngest to be convicted of murder in Britain in 250 years. Venables and Thompson were then sentenced to serve at Her Majesty's pleasure, which is standard protocol for juvenile offenders convicted of murder or manslaughter. This sentence
Hold on, I just have to ask, when was this made? When was there a thing made for juveniles who are convicted of murder or manslaughter? I just want to know how often this happens that they had to have a rule set in place for it. Hold on, I want to read this. Offender when committing a murder of duty to detain him at Her Majesty's pleasure. When a person convicted of murder pays to the court have been under 18 at the time shall notwithstand anything or any other act consenting. What is Her Majesty's pleasure?
has no maximum, but it does have a minimum to be determined on a case-by-case basis. In this case, the boys would only serve 8 years, at which time they would be 18.
I didn't know that part. The max these kids served was 8 freaking years? That's it? 8 freaking... What?
After that point, James Bulger's killers were to be assessed and, if they weren't deemed to be a danger to society, released. By all accounts, Venables and Thompson showed no violent behaviour in prison, but instead served their time for James Bulger's murder quietly and without incident. In 2001, the then 18-year-old Thompson and Venables were released from prison. Upon their release, John Venables and Robert Thompson were given new identities and granted legal anonymity for life due to the public fury that surrounded their trial and the danger of citizens hunting them down to get rid.
Why are we protecting Why are we protecting killers? Why are the British government protecting killers? That's so messed up. You should be protecting them. You should let them go out. It's fucking... You know their destiny. Their destiny is they're gonna end up somewhere. They're gonna end up dead via somewhere. Like, oh no, their destiny is meant to I wish I could find them. Give them, I would want to know every single crime they did, and I'd want to do it to them.
Revenge. In fact, a global injunction was passed that prohibited any information about the boys being shared at all. This includes whatever names they were going by, any descriptions of their appearance, and any images of them are actually illegal. To date, no significant attempts at vengeance have been made. James Bulger's mother, Denise, was able to locate Robert Thompson in 2004, but was, quote, paralysed with hatred and could not confront him. To his credit, I suppose, Robert Thompson has been able to integrate properly into society and, as far as we know, has never had any run-ins with the law since being released. John Venables, however, is a different story. In 2010, he was imprisoned for downloading images depicting various kinds of...
I mean, I shouldn't be surprised. I mean, I shouldn't be. But I am. Well, interesting because we weren't supposed to know what name they're going by, but this guy got back in prison, so I guess people found out. I know his name isn't John like his original name's John Venables, so we didn't know what he looked like, but clearly they found he went back to prison again.
Abuse being inflicted upon male toddlers. He became eligible for parole in 2013, at which time Ralph Bulger, James's father, told the parole board that he couldn't forgive his son's killers and that Venables should not be released. Unfortunately, Venables was released, but in November 2017, he was again imprisoned when more child abuse images and a pedophile manual that provided instructions on having sex with children would.
I want this guy to die. I want this guy to die. I want this guy to die. I want him so badly to die. I hate this guy already so much. Oh my god.
Discovered on his computer, and he was sentenced to 3 years and 4 months in prison. An interesting note about John Venables is that he has also given away his real identity numerous times, which meant the police have had to keep relocating him. He's also
I love that. This guy's such a... They're just like, here's your new identity. He's just like, okay, everybody, my new name is this and this and what. And they're like, okay, we'll move you somewhere else because you can't just keep your mouth shut.
also apparently being photographed with others. I say apparently because in the pictures I've seen, there's really no way to conclusively confirm that it's him. As you've noticed, I'm not showing any of said pictures. That's because I'd rather not be arrested. Yes, it's incredibly stupid that the law is continuing to protect a man who brutally murdered a 2-year-old boy when he...
I agree. The fact they're protecting these two is absolutely sickening to me. The fact... You cannot convince me why these kids deserve, these two, especially John frickin' Venables or whatever the hell his name is, deserves any form of protection. This man is sick in every way. Robert Thompson, he at least got back into society and has been fine, he's been crime free, so maybe there's a justification to protect him for that. This man, this fucker deserves to rot in prison.
He was a child and then grew up to be a pedophile. It's clear he'll never receive the punishment he truly deserves, and James Bulger's parents have had to watch the man who murdered their son walk free several times. To this day,
it is weird that this guy can get caught with stuff and they now just still let him free. Like, do they even convict him or anything? Like, does he have some immunity now where he can't legally be charged with no matter what crime he commits? Is this a thing he has? Because if that's a thing, that's so fucked up.
We still don't know why Robert Thompson and John Venables decided to murder a child, and we probably never will. But when they killed James Bulger, they proved that a person is never too young to be capable of committing an act of evil.
White House farm murders.
The White House Farm is a farmhouse located in Tolson-Darcy in Essex, England. The house belonged to husband and wife Neville and June Bamber, and the two had lived there since their marriage in 1949. Neville had been an RAF pilot in the Second World War and was also a local magistrate as well as a farmer. The two were unable to have children of their own, so they adopted a son and daughter, Sheila, the granddaughter of chaplain and author Eric J., who insisted that his 18-year-old daughter put her up for adoption, and Jeremy, who was born from an affair between a student midwife and an army sergeant and placed into care when he was 6 weeks old. Jeremy lived in the nearby village of Goldhanger and worked on his parents' farm for £170 a week. Sheila lived in a flat in Hampstead, London with her two sons, Daniel and Richard, who were born out of her failed marriage to her high school sweetheart, Colin Caffell, who had been repeatedly unfaithful to her and even began an affair with another woman after Sheila had suffered a miscarriage. She struggled to get
Men are so
by working low-paying and demeaning jobs, such as working as a waitress in an odd fetish restaurant where all the waitresses dressed as schoolgirls, and she also posed for a pornographic magazine, which she greatly regretted. She also had problems with her
Okay, so I have multiple thoughts. So the magazine, she probably ain't the first, and she won't be the last person who has done that and probably regretted it. Now, the fetish restaurant is a different conversation we need to have. Because why is there a restaurant with that there? That shouldn't be a thing. There shouldn't be a restaurant for that. That's weird to me. That's weird.
Mental health, as she was schizophrenic. She was said to frequently clash with her very strict religious mother due to their very different views, and the two's relationship became increasingly strained as the years went on. Despite working on his parents' farm, Jeremy was also said to have had a very tumultuous relationship with them. One major point of contention between them was the fact that Jeremy happened to be bisexual, which Neville and June greatly disapproved of, as they didn't want their son engaging in sexual relations with other men. He also left school with no qualifications, which will have only worsened their disappointments in him. In 1978,
I don't know why I paused there.
at the age of 18, Jeremy left the UK for Australia, hoping to start a new life there. Instead of finding happiness, Jeremy became a criminal engaging in petty theft, once breaking into a jewellery shop and stealing watches. He also may have begun dealing heroin before finally returning to England, where he worked menial jobs. He'd also apparently trashed one of his parents' shops after he had begun working for them. Jeremy and Sheila were both in line to inherit the farm from their parents, but Neville had told Jeremy that he would lose his half of the inheritance if he stopped working for them. On the night of August 4th, 1985, Sheila and her 2 sons arrived at the farm to stay for a few days. On August 6th, Jeremy also arrived to stay for a few days. At 9:30 that evening, Jeremy was seen leaving the farm. The farm secretary, who happened to see him leaving, called Neville and told him that something seemed wrong and that Jeremy was in a foul mood, looking as if he had been in an argument. Sheila and June apparently both seemed normal at this time, so it puzzled the secretary why Jeremy seemed so angry. This, quote, normal atmosphere would only last for several hours, however, as White House Farm would soon be the scene of a massacre. Between 12 a.m. and 3 a.m., a struggle involving Neville Bamber broke out at the farmhouse. He was shot 8 times in the head, with evidence suggesting he was shot at point-blank range. The killer then shot June Bamber several times in the head. Sheila's sons, Daniel and Nicholas, were also shot as they slept, with Daniel having been shot 4 times in the head, and Nicholas being shot 3 times. The killer then carved, "I hate this place" in the bedroom cupboard. Sheila was then shot twice in the master bedroom, both shots being in her head. At 3:36 a.m, Chelmsford Police Station received a call about what had happened, with the caller saying that Sheila had gone berserk with a semi-automatic rifle before the line went dead. The man calling the police was Jeremy Bamber. The Armed Response Police Unit drove to the scene with Jeremy. They questioned him outside the property, and he said that he was on the phone to his father when he heard the sound of Neville being cut off. He revealed that he was the one who actually loaded the rifle, as he believed that he had heard rabbits outside and left it on the kitchen table with a box of ammunition next to it. The police waited until daylight to attempt to enter the house, as it was too risky to enter it in the dark with an armed gunman inside. The police entered around 7 a.m. and found the bodies, and counted that 25 rounds had been fired. Sheila was found lying on the floor with the rifle in her hands. Naturally, the police did indeed believe that Sheila had killed her family before doing you-know-what to herself. The police were so sure of it that they did not search the house for any more evidence, and left after the...
How are police so bad at them? Police can't... No, this is a regular thing. How are police this bad at their jobs? This is next level. This is next level, though. Like, you walk in, the girl's just... Everyone's dead. And they walk in, the girl just has a gun, like, kind of placed on her hand. They're like, well, she has the gun. She must have did it. We did our job. Starts high-fiving they start high-fiving each other. Fucking walk, celebrating. Yeah, we solved another one.
Bodies had been removed. Jeremy would later have the blood-stained carpets removed and burned. That said, the police later realized that the gun they found at the scene did not have a silencer. A rifle being fired would make far too much noise for the rest of the people in the house not to hear it. The silencer had been left at the Bambers' home, and it was later discovered when some of Jeremy's relatives came to visit him several days later. It had Sheila's blood on it, as well as one single grey hair, presumably belonging to Neville. They also found the sight from the gun, which had been removed with a screwdriver. They called the police, who then came to collect this evidence on August 12th. The police determined that the length of the gun with the silencer attached would have been too long for someone Sheila's height to have used on themselves. This led the police to believe that Sheila had in fact not been the killer. On August 16th, the
took you long enough.
Family's funeral was held. Jeremy was photographed attending the proceedings, looking heartbroken during it. Some experts, however, looked at the photographs and believed that his body language was not genuine. In particular, they found that his facial expressions did not match those of someone genuinely going through grief. People who knew him also believed that he was just acting. Jeremy no
shit.
Inherited all of his parents' money after their death, and he almost immediately went on a spending spree, culminating in a holiday to Amsterdam, seeming completely unaffected by his family's death at this point. On September 7th of the same year, Jeremy's girlfriend, Julie Mumford, who had been photographed with him at the funeral, revealed to the police that Jeremy had actually planned and carried out the murders himself, and that he had previously talked about getting rid of them. And when his parents and sister were all under one roof, he decided it was, quote, tonight or never. She also said that he had phoned her on August 6th, saying he had been thinking about committing the murders all day. She also claimed that Jeremy had hired his friend, Matthew MacDonald, to kill the family. This statement had come right after the two of them had broken up. The next day, Jeremy and his friend Matthew MacDonald were arrested, though MacDonald actually had a solid alibi and was released. Jeremy insisted that Julie Mumford had lied due to their breakup.
Well, of course he'd say that, but then again, I've seen some actors do some insane things. I mean, this one's true. We know this one's true. However, I could not be shocked to see an ex say that just to get someone in prison. I've seen some insane things. Women do insane things due to breakups.
And he was released on bail. After this, he went on holiday to the south of France, but not before breaking into the family home to collect some papers for his trip. He claimed he did this due to accidentally leaving his keys at his home in London. After he returned from France on September 29th, he was immediately arrested and charged with all 5 murders. On November 28, 1986, Jeremy Bambo was convicted of 5 counts of murder. He was given a life sentence, and it was recommended that he serve at least 25 years, but this was later changed to a whole life order, meaning he will never be released from prison.
Good.
He's appealed this sentence several times, but has been unsuccessful.
Cause you did it, you nimrod.
There are many people who believe that Jeremy is innocent, and that it really was Sheila who murdered her family before.
Who? Who could possibly believe that? There was nothing that justifies this. There was no way she would do this. She has no for multiple reasons. Number one, there was no way she would kill her father, her mother, her kids, herself, and leave her brother standing to receive everything. Because I'm gonna assume she would receive stuff too. So if the goal was to receive things, she didn't do it right. Like, there's nothing to prove this. I don't know what stupid, dim-shitted brain you gotta have to believe she's the one, the guy's innocent. He's clearly did it.
Doing the deed on herself. I'm not here to talk about conspiracy theories and all that. I'm just here to focus on the murders themselves. People really do seem to forget that an entire family was murdered in cold blood.
Yeah.
The most tragic part of it, of course, is that 2 innocent 6-year-old boys were among the victims. If Jeremy really was the killer, then their lives will have been taken from them due to the greed of their very own adopted uncle. If Sheila was the killer, then she murdered her own children. Either way, there's no denying that this massacre is definitely one of the most gruesome and shocking crimes in British history.
I'll agree with that. The monster of Woodchip. Why do I feel like I've heard this?
This next entry shows that sometimes, even if you trust your friend with the lives of your own children, something horrible can still happen to them at that very friend's hands. David McGreevy was born in 1951 in Lancashire, England. The son of an army sergeant father, he and his parents moved frequently throughout various army posts during his childhood. Due to moving so much, David never had much of a chance to interact and make friends with other children, which, as a result, made him a very lonely and awkward child, who was only really able to be close to members of his family. He left school in 1967 at the age of 16 and joined the Royal Navy. Due to not socialising much as a child, the fact that he would now be socialising with hundreds of his fellow Navy men was quite daunting to him. To ease into this, he began accompanying his colleagues to bars and engaging in social drinking. This led to him actually making quite a few friends, but also caused some of his comrades to develop a dislike towards him, as he began exhibiting a very arrogant and cocky attitude towards them. His drinking actually became a problem for him, as his behaviour would often lead to him facing disciplinary action. He was eventually court-martialed after starting a fire in his commanding officer's office during one of his drunken episodes. He'd broken in and read the report book, and after seeing his name and believing he was due for another disciplinary, he burned the book in his officer's waste bin. His superiors suggested he undergo a psychological evaluation, as they believed his behaviour had gotten out of hand. It would seem they were not happy with the results of said evaluation, as he was dismissed soon after. Following this, he moved back with his parents and attempted to find employment. However, due to his laziness and generally unlikable attitude, he was never able to hold down a job for very long. Due to this, his drinking gradually became worse. Eventually, his parents couldn't take his drunken behavior or his refusal to work anymore and threw him out of their home. After spending several nights sleeping on the streets, David met his friend Clive Ralph, who offered to let David stay with him and his family for a while. Clive was married to Elsie Ralph and they had 2 children, 4-year-old Paul and 1-year-old Dawn Maria. At the time of David moving in, Elsie was pregnant with their 3rd child, Samantha Jane, who would be born a few months after David moved in with the family. While living with them, David was apparently great with the Ralphs' children and was almost like a second father to them. He was also able to get a part-time job in a factory, which allowed him to pay rent to Clive and Elsie. David still struggled with his drinking, however, and during his stay with the family, he was arrested twice for drunk and disorderly behavior, but Clive and Elsie chose not to kick him out since he was such a great lodger and so good with their children, a decision they would soon come to regret for the rest of their lives. 7 months after Samantha Jane's birth, Clive and Elsie decided they needed to move into a bigger place that could accommodate their growing family. To help raise the money for this, Elsie got a job as a barmaid at the nearby Punch Bowl Tavern. While Clive was working as a lorry driver at his father's company, the 2 parents would leave for work at different times of the day, but Elsie's shift at the Punch Bowl began while Clive was still at work, so David would look after the children while the parents were away. Clive would come home from work each day and put the children to bed before going to collect Elsie from the Punch Bowl at 10 p.m. All in all, things were going great for the Ralph family, as Clive and Elsie were able to work and save up for their new home, thanks to David being there to look after their children. One thing they should not have ignored, however, was David's drinking. Up until that point, they'd looked past it even despite his 2 arrests, but they would soon come to realize that they had made a terrible mistake. On Friday the 13th of April 1973, David had been out drinking with a friend all day. He drank between 5 and 8 pints and naturally became intoxicated. He put out his cigarette in his friend's drink, which led to an argument between the two. It didn't escalate into violence, but it caused David to be in a horrible mood. Eventually, Clive came to pick him up in the evening. Despite David clearly being very drunk, Clive still left the children with him while he went to pick up Elsie from the punch bowl. Little did Clive know, this would be the last time he would ever see his children alive. Not long after David was left with the children, Samantha Jane began crying for her bottle. Out of nowhere, David flew into a rage and suffocated her by covering her mouth. He then slit her throat with a razor and beat her to the point that it caused a compound fracture in her skull. David then turned his attention to Dawn and used the razor on her. He then strangled Paul to death with some curtain wire. The neighbors heard the sound of children screaming and called the police. David would use the razor and a pickaxe from the cellar to butcher his victims. Shockingly, David still wasn't done. He carried the bodies outside and impaled them on the fence spikes in the back garden. The police arrived soon after. They knocked on the door, and after getting no answer, they decided to go around the back and were met with the truly gruesome scene of what David had done. At 11:15 p.m, Clive and Elsie returned home. The police would not let them enter the house, but informed them of what had happened. The police found David several hours later, walking down the road not far from the house. At first he denied what he had done, but later confessed to the 3 murders. At his trial, the full details of what he had done were left out, as it was considered far too shocking to be read aloud. David was convicted of 3 counts of murder and sentenced to life in prison. He would spend 45 years in prison before finally being released in 2018 after the parole board deemed he no longer posed a threat to public safety. Prison psychologists have also confirmed that he has also, quote, developed self-control and learned to remain calm in stressful situations. That said, he must always wear a tag around his ankle and is kept to a very strict curfew. When Elsie Ralph was informed that David had been released, she said, "I am so angry and upset. I feel terrible. I feel like killing him if I got a hold of him. He should never have been released. I want people to know he is walking about. What this animal did to my children was every bit as bad as what the Moors murderers did. He put my babies on spikes for God's sake. He mutilated them and they died in agony." While David may be, quote, rehabilitated now, It's clear he'll never be forgiven for what he did. The fact that David brutally murdered 3 innocent children and robbed his friends of the 3 things they cherish more than anything else in the world is something he has carried with him for nearly 50 years, and it will be with him until the day he dies.
That story is one of the most sickening things I've ever heard. My mind shifted when he described what happened to those innocent children by this heartless bastard. I'm trying to remain, trying to get my mind back focused, but oh, that one messed me up.
Rahan Ashad was a taxi driver living in Manchester, England. Born in Pakistan into an impoverished family, he and his family moved to the UK when he was a child. He would actually be sent back to Pakistan when he was a young adult to marry his arranged bride, Uzma, who was also his first cousin, and the two would move back to England immediately after. They apparently did not have a happy marriage, with Rahan claiming that his wife would sometimes hit him. That said, he also admits that he greatly disliked how much Uzma changed after coming to the UK, saying that she would wear more revealing and Western clothes, such as tight jeans and low-cut shirts. As Rahan and Uzma were both Muslim, he naturally saw this as disrespectful and going against their beliefs. If anything, it would seem Uzma wanted to rebel against her strict, old-fashioned husband, who believed she was throwing away her poor Pakistani roots to enjoy her life in the West, something he simply couldn't accept. The two both worked, with Rahan being a taxi driver and Uzma working in a beauty salon, and they did this while raising 3 children. Rahan's resentment towards his wife didn't just stop at her westernized dress style either. He believed she was actually having an affair. He first started suspecting this when they went shopping together, and she got a call on her phone, to which she answered, "I can't talk right now, I'm with my husband." Uzma insisted that she was just talking to one of her clients from the beauty salon, but Rahan said that he had also seen text messages on her phone that confirmed the affair was in fact real. He believed she was having an affair with Nikki Iqbal, the husband of their neighbour and occasional babysitter, Musarat Iqbal. Naturally, she denied this. At some point in 2004, Uzma travelled back to Pakistan to attend her father's funeral. Rahan decided to get back at Uzma by selling the family home for £90,000 while she was away. He then took his children with him to Pakistan and went to see Uzma, who was staying with her mother, to comfort her over the loss of her father. Rahan showed up at her home with the children and gave her forged divorce papers with a fake signature from a judge. He then left the children with her and went travelling by himself, with some believing he married a second wife during this time, but he denies this. After returning home from his travels, he decided he wanted to reconcile with Uzma after some word of advice from Uzma's brother, Rahat. He even bought a new house for them and their children. Uzma, however, did not believe that Rahan was being genuine and refused to live with him. At the time, she and the children were living in a council house, but Rahan believed that the real reason she was living there was so that she could meet Nikki Iqbal, the man he suspected she was having an affair with. To try and win her back, he went on a spending spree and bought many lavish items for the two of them. At this point, Uzma told her friends, "He's either turned a corner or he's about to kill me. Count the days until he kills me." He bought her a BMW, computers for their children, and completely redecorated the house, all in an attempt to win her back. But at this point, Uzma was more scared than anything else. After all this, however, Rahan would learn that he was actually right about Uzma having an affair when he learned that Nikki had actually travelled with her to Pakistan for her father's funeral. The two had begun their affair in 2003 as she was unhappy with their marriage. Rahan learned of this after Uzma had actually agreed to give their marriage another go. This proved to be the breaking point for Rahan. On July 28, 2006, Rahan beat Uzma to death with a rounder's bat and covered her body with a towel. He then carried his 3 sleeping children downstairs and beat each of them to death with the same bat. Uzma had suffered 23 blows to the head. He then hid the bat in his garden, drove to Heathrow Airport and boarded a plane to Bangkok, Thailand, and then travelled to Phuket in the southern part of the country. 1 month later, Rahan and Uzma's neighbour called the police when they could smell a foul odour coming from the home. The police broke in and found the decomposing bodies of Uzma and her 3 children. The police found a receipt for the bat that Rahan had bought a day before the murder, and also learned that he had booked the flight to Thailand 2 weeks in advance, meaning he had been planning the murder for at least 2 weeks. The Thai authorities were informed and they arrested Rahan and sent him back to the UK. Upon being arrested at the airport, he said, "I confess to the murder, my beautiful kids. I don't regret killing that bitch, but my kids, killing my kids." He actually changed his statement later on, saying Uzma had actually beaten the children to death and he killed her in response. When asked about the murders, Detective Martin Bottomley, who was in charge of the investigation, said, "This is one of the most brutal and devastating murders I've ever dealt with. Many of us have children, which makes the brutality Rahan used to kill his own children even harder to comprehend. The only time he showed any remorse was when he got off the plane from Thailand." Uzma's mother and brothers were in the courtroom during Rahan's trial. Her brother Rahat could be heard cheering when the jury gave their verdict, finding Rahan guilty of 4 counts of murder. As the judge sentenced Rahan, they said, "You killed your entire family in circumstances of great brutality. You beat your wife to death in a bedroom and then coldly and deliberately you brought your sleeping children downstairs to meet their deaths. There is no suggestion of mental illness on your part. Life imprisonment, in your case, means life." As you just heard, Rahan was given a whole life sentence, meaning he will never be released from prison.
Good, he freaking deserves not to be. Let him rot in the fucking prison cell where he belongs.
Rahan Ashad let his jealousy and rage overwhelm him when he found out about his wife's unfaithfulness and killed not only her, but his own children just to cover his tracks. Regardless of your views on adultery, there's no denying that Rahan is a cruel and heartless monster, and he'll remain in prison until the day he dies, where he belongs.
Yes, he should. Absolutely should. Shameless Mick.
Oh look, the scum, the scrounger, the shameless Mick has done it again. Well, I'll tell you what, f*** all of you, because at the end of the day, my life, my wife's life, we do what we want. We don't care what you people think.
Mick Philpott was an interesting man, to say the least. He was well known in his local area of Derbyshire for being the man who claimed to have more children than any other man in Britain. According to him, he had 17 kids from 4 different women. Just an FYI, that's not even close to having the most children, but that's not important. Born in 1956 in Derbyshire, England, he showed the first signs of what kind of man he was at 19 years old. At the time, Mick was in the army and was dating 15-year-old Kim Hill. According to Kim, when the two began dating, Mick was very loving and caring towards her. This changed when one day he hit her. He immediately began crying after doing this and pleaded with her not to tell her father, as he knew that her father would definitely retaliate on her behalf by hitting her much harder than Mick had hit Kim. She did not tell her father, but this would prove to be a bad mistake, as Mick continued beating her and sometimes would not do it in private, with one of these incidents apparently happening in a pub, in which he hit her with a pool cue. When she attempted to leave Mick, this enraged him, and he attacked her with a hammer, breaking her arm and fracturing her kneecap. Every time he beat her, Kim would have to explain to her school that she got hurt fighting other girls to cover for Mick. After 2 years of abuse, Kim finally decided to leave Mick and sent a letter to him saying that she was breaking up with him. Mick responded to this by breaking into her home and attacking her while she was asleep in bed, stabbing her 27 times with a knife. Kim's mother heard the screaming and rushed into the room, at which point Mick turned his attention on her and stabbed her 13 times, but she managed to escape the house and rushed to her neighbours, telling them to call the police. While she did this, Mick returned to Kim's room to finish her off. When the paramedics arrived, Mick was sat on the stairs, still holding the knife, and told them, "I wouldn't bother, she's a goner." Miraculously, Kim and her mother survived their injuries.
Oh my... resiliency. Complete fighting spirit for life. By Kim. Because he stabbed her, 20-some times? Went back to finish the job, yet she still somehow survived.
For the attack, Mick was found guilty of attempted murder and grievous bodily harm, and was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison, but served less than half of his sentence due to good behaviour.
I hate that. I hate that. Never cut someone short for good behavior. Like, what is good behavior? Was he not committing a crime in prison? Like, I hate the term good behavior. Hate it in prison. Hate it.
During his time in prison, he would write to Kim and say that they would get married after he was released. However, upon being released, he actually married another woman named Pamela Lomax. The two would have 3 children together, but he was also abusive towards her as well, and she was too afraid to report him to the police. Eventually, he would leave Pamela for Heather Keogh, who, at 14 years old, was 23 years younger than him. The two ran away together when she turned 16. and would have 2 sons together, but he began to abuse her after this as he wanted a daughter. In 2000, Mick met...
Well, it's not her fault. Of course his stupid brain didn't figure that out, but it's like not her fault that she's having sons. I don't think there's anything real much difference unless I don't understand how the fucking that's made. I don't think there's much real stuff you can do there.
19-year-old Mairead Duffy, and the two moved in together almost immediately. Right after this, Mick met another girl named Lisa Willis, who was only 16. She would move in with Mick and Mairead and become his live-in mistress. Mick and Mairead would marry in 2003, with Lisa as their bridesmaid. From this point, Mick would father 11 children between the two of them, and they somehow managed to live in a 3-bedroom council house. Mick left all the work to Mairead and Lisa, who both had jobs, while he got child benefits and also pocketed all of Mairead and Lisa's earnings. Mick asked the council for a bigger house, but they told him there were no properties available. This was also around the time Mick was featured on television in a documentary detailing his lifestyle and his anger over not being able to get a large property. At one point in the show, he proclaims that he'll just have another child if it helps him get a bigger house.
I think it's a load of shit. I think it's a load of fucking shit. I think it's a load of crap. Nothing said about the being overcrowded in the house, is it? You know? I'm fucking annoyed. The fact is, I missed the most important part out. You know, we're living in cramped conditions. Right, I'll kick Lisa out my ass and let her move back in property on her own, which is going to cost them perhaps more money than what it's going to cost me. You know, you can't win. Fuck them. I'm going to have some more babies.
In 2007, Mick was featured on the highly popular Jeremy Kyle Show, which is a talk show in a similar vein to the Maury Povich Show. In it, Mick defended his lifestyle and claimed he couldn't get a job due to his criminal record.
We all work.
You don't work.
Oh, yes, I do work.
Yeah, I know your argument on this. Just give it to us. You say I look after my kids. What's wrong with a man looking after his kids other than a woman?
That's correct. What is wrong with a man looking after his children? I mean, I'm old-fashioned. I believe the man should be at work, but unfortunately, because the media keeps putting this certain story in the paper, I cannot get a job.
You can't get a job because of what?
Criminal record.
Sis.
I said, you do,
Why
mate.
are you so
I will
defensive?
be. Because when it comes to my kids, I'm very
I've just
defensive.
complimented your kids.
After I had a go at you.
I just said that
Listen,
ever
just
since...
get out, just talk to that, pal. Talk to that. You're not worth it.
I complimented your kids, and I sat and listened to you, and all I was saying was how good they looked. You have jumped out of your box with one hell of a chip on your shoulder. You haven't even had anybody say anything to you so far,
I don't
and
have
you're
to.
making signs.
I don't have to.
No. You've no reason to do that. But I'll tell you something, when a grown man who purports to be a good father, probably he is, sits on national television and does that, no wonder you can't get a damn job.
He basically made himself out to be an arrogant and entitled asshole, while some guests...
Well, judging by what I've learned from his past, he's probably an interrogant and entitled asshole.
who went on the Jeremy Kyle Show became somewhat well liked by the audience and would actually appear several times. They wanted nothing to do with Mick, especially after Jeremy angrily berated him for millions of viewers around the UK to see. He would also appear on the ITV series Anne Widdecombe Versus, in which Widdecombe spent a week with him and his family.
This is my wife, Mairead.
Hello, Mairead.
This is going to
Hello.
sound strange. This is my second wife, Lisa.
Hello, Lisa. How have you got 2 wives? They don't allow it in this country.
Well, no, but I class them as 2 wives.
I see.
If the country don't like it, it's tough.
Right.
Needless to say, it wasn't a pleasant experience for her, as Mick was just as rude and dismissive as he was on the Jeremy Kyle Show. He also once again used that weird insult where he tells people to talk to his elbow.
I am
Get
working.
a job.
I'm looking after my
Get
kids.
a job.
Listen, this shows you what a bitch you
Get
are,
a
doesn't
job.
it? You useless. You are.
Yeah,
Seriously,
yeah.
You're like
Yeah.
the rest. Talk
Yeah.
to that because you're not worth the
I work,
extension.
mate.
I don't know if that's a Derby thing or whatever, but it just looks stupid. During the
Agreed. 100% agreed. It does look stupid.
documentary, Anne Widdecombe witnessed some of Mick's abuse, as he regularly called Lisa a bitch, and that his children seemed uncomfortable around him and never went to him for affection. In February 2012, Lisa finally left Mick after she simply couldn't take his abuse anymore, and took her 5 children with her. She had to lie to Mick and tell him she was just taking her children swimming, so as to avoid any conflict. Angered by Lisa leaving him, Mick decided that the only way to get revenge on her, and also regain custody of his children, was to frame her for a terrible crime, because he planned to make himself look like the hero in the situation. In May
Oh no, what do you plan to do? I don't even want to know. I don't want to know, but I'm going to find out. But this is, oh god, what is your entitled little pathetic ass about to do?
2012, Mick, Mairead, and his friend Paul Mosley set out to plan to burn down his home and frame Lisa for arson. This would take place a day before a custody hearing for their children. On May 11th, Paul Mosley poured gas through the letterbox and lit the fire. The plan was for Mick to rush in and save his children from the fire. Unfortunately, this plan went horribly wrong. The fire spread very quickly and trapped the children in their bedroom upstairs. 5 of their children were killed in their sleep via smoke inhalation, with the 6th child, eldest son Dwayne, dying in hospital soon after. Firefighters said that the fire reached temperatures of up to 930 degrees Fahrenheit and that there was no way the children could have survived once the fire reached the upstairs. Lisa and her brother were arrested under suspicion of arson, but they were released just hours later when the police determined that they were not the culprits. Mick and Mairead called a press conference in which Mick broke down while talking about his children.
First of all, I want to thank my 3 oldest children because they are helping us to cope with what's going on. And then there's a young lad called Daniel Stevenson who tried to get in the house the same as myself, Joe across the road, and the Butler brothers. And of course there's the poor firemen, the police, the ambulances, the doctors, the nurses, literally everybody who tried to help save our children. They couldn't. Excuse me a minute.
I hate you. Oh, you're sick. You are sick. You heartless individual.
We've decided that through our son Dwayne, and unfortunately the last one's passed away, that we're going to donate his organs to save another child, which is what we want, because if you can save another child, that makes us happy. It takes a bit of the pain away. And we can't express.
Does your dumb entitled ass think if they give organs to another child, you'll just end up keeping the child? It wouldn't surprise me. You seem like a freaking idiot, so it wouldn't surprise me.
Our gratitude to everybody that's been concerned with the case, with what's been going on. I've actually been down to our home, and what we saw, we just cannot believe it. We grew up in a community that's had a lot of problems with violence and God knows what else, and to see this community to come together like they have, it's just too overwhelming. We've had people from America, France, even the travelling community. It's just, we've been to see them, it's just overwhelming, isn't it? But I say I can't express enough the police, the fire brigade and the ambulance services, because what we feel, them poor gentlemen from the fire brigade who saw what we've seen, you know, my heart goes out to them, because it's not just us that's suffering, it's them as well, it's everybody. But there's one thing that I would request is please leave my family alone. If you've got any questions or anything at all, please don't come through me or my family. Please go to the police, because what's happening at the moment, you're disrupting what these officers are trying to do. So please, I beg you, leave us alone and let us try and live in peace and quiet. That's all I ask.
All I hope is this video, this playing, won't frig up copyright or anything, but this guy's messed the hell up.
Thank you.
These tears were, however, just an act. Before going out in front of the press, Mick was seen flirting with a female police officer and even invited her back to his hotel room, because, as we've established by now, Mick is one of the most opportunistic womanizers in history who never missed a chance to try and find another potential mother. The police actually suspected Mick and Mairead were the ones behind the fire due to various pieces of evidence, including a ladder at the back of the house near the children's bedroom window, clearly placed there for Nick to climb in and save them. The most damning piece of evidence was, of course, the recording from the wire that the police had hidden in the couple's hotel room, where they were caught red-handed talking about sticking to the story. In one recording, Mick outright said it was his fault the children were dead.
What did you say? Tell me what you said to him, man. What did you say about how many times I went up ladders?
I almost can't how many times I went up the ladders.
What did you say about me trying to get in?
You tried everything you could to get in. Like I said to him, I wanted to run through the flames up the stairs.
Would you cry when you were saying it? How bad?
Not really, really bad, but I did cry.
That's hysterical.
That's messed up.
Let it go, you wrong, Lisa. It's my fault that half the family's gone. It's my fault we've lost our children. It's my fault we've lost the other part children. It's my fault we lost Lisa. I should have seen it all coming, though. It is my fault.
On May 28th, the two were arrested and later charged with murder. On November 5th of the same year, Paul Mosley was arrested and charged with murder after gasoline was found on the clothes he'd been wearing at the scene, though his charge was later downgraded to manslaughter, as were Mick and Mairead's. This was because the two proved that they did not intend to kill their children, and that it was just a stunt gone wrong. On April 2nd, 2013,
That doesn't matter. They're the responsible ones for the family, for the kids' death. They are guilty of murder. What do you mean? Them two, like the whole thing is murder. Don't you dare. That's some BS.
the three were found guilty of manslaughter. Mick himself was sentenced to life in prison, but will be eligible for parole in 2028, while Mairead and Paul were sentenced to 17 years with a minimum of 8.5. Mairead was released in late 2020, and Paul was released in 2021, though was later rearrested after breaching the conditions of his parole. Mick and Mairead may have not intended to kill their children, but there's no denying that the children's deaths are entirely their fault.
Yes.
Mick's greed was so strong, and he was so desperate to keep his children so he could receive more unemployment benefits and get a bigger house, that he hatched a plan that he was, quite frankly, too dense and stupid to realize could go horribly wrong. After a lifetime of hurting and abusing
I'm not even. No, it's not even just him. It's him, the girl, and his friend. All three of them made up this plan with no realization of how fucking stupid it is.
women and killing his own children, he's now exactly where he belongs, and probably gets abuse from his fellow prisoners every day, and it's hard to deny that he deserves it. Mick Philpott is not just a monster, he's also an absolute idiot.
Agreed. I think this is the last one.
Lee James Rigby was born on July 4, 1987 in Manchester, England. As a child, he always dreamed of being in the British Army, and in 2005, at the age of 18, he began his training. He was thrilled to be living out his dream, and did extremely well, and got on with his fellow soldiers, with them giving him the nickname Riggers. He also took up drumming, so that he could join the army parades as a member of the Royal Regiment of Fusiliers. It was around the time that Lee began his training that he also met his wife-to-be, Rebecca, and the two would marry 2 years later. Over the next few years, Lee was stationed in various parts of the world, from Germany to Cyprus and Afghanistan. Once this was over, he returned to the UK and would be based in London from that point. He'd work as a guard for the Tower of London and generally got to enjoy a much more relaxed life with his wife, and in 2011, the two had their son, Jack. Around this time, Lee began working with the UK-based charity Help for Heroes, which provides support for soldiers returning from conflict with various psychological or physical damage, such as PTSD and severe injuries. As a soldier himself, Lee felt very strongly about helping his comrades, as not all of them had been as lucky as him and returned home unscathed. He was soon sent back to Afghanistan, where he actually began an affair with a military officer named Amy West. This would last the entire time they were in Afghanistan, and when Lee returned to the UK, he told his wife Rebecca that he wanted a divorce. In 2013, while Lee was in London and Amy was still stationed in Afghanistan, the two became engaged. On May 22nd of the same year, Lee was on his way to work at the army barracks in Woolwich, London. He got off the metro and made his way from the station to the barracks. As he was crossing the road, a car sped into him, and this was no accident. The driver of the car fully intended to hit Lee. As he lay on the ground, unable to move, the driver and the passenger of the car exited the vehicle and made their way towards Lee. In broad daylight, in full view of the people who witnessed Lee being hit by the car, the two men drew knives from their pockets and began stabbing wildly as he lay on the ground. The two men then drew their other weapons. One held a revolver and the other held a meat cleaver.
What the hell did this guy do to you people to deserve this type of sickening crime done to him? What did he do to you two?
The man with the meat cleaver began hacking at Lee's neck. They also dragged Lee's body further into the road, so that all of the terrified people looking on would be able to see what they were doing more clearly. After Lee was dead, the two men circled his body, talking to each other.
Didn't one of them in the opening, he say a terrorist attack in broad daylight? Or something like that? Found it.
And yelling at the witnesses. In an almost surreal moment, when one of the witnesses was filming the scene with their phone, One of the attackers spoke on camera saying, "The only reason we have killed this man is because Muslims are dying daily by British soldiers. This British soldier is one. He is an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth." Eventually the police arrived and the two men were still there, hanging around Lee's body, seemingly having no intention of running. When the armed police arrived, however, things took a violent turn. The two men started running towards them, clearly not intending to go down without a fight. The police shot the men in their shoulders, at which point they fell to the ground and dropped their weapons. The men were injured, but alive. The two were taken into police custody and transported to the hospital. Their names were Michael Adbalajo and Michael Adbawali. Adbalajo was a 29-year-old father of 6, with his youngest child being born just 4 days before the murder. He was the son of Nigerian immigrants who were also very strict Christians. What makes Adbalajo being involved in this attack crazy is that he wasn't just some angry thug, he was a very well-educated former university student. But it was at university that he became involved with the Al-Muhajirun, an Islamic hate group. He converted to Islam and began taking part in the group's activities, which led to him being arrested several times and becoming known to the London police. It was at university that he also met Michael Adbawali and got him to join Al-Muhajirun as well. They didn't plan to kill Lee Rigby in particular. They were looking for any British soldier to kill, and when they saw Lee walking to the barracks in his Help for Heroes hoodie, they knew they'd found a target. They outright admitted this to the police, saying that he just happened to be the soldier they saw first. They said that Lee Rigby had done nothing to provoke them at all. In short, Lee was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
We decided to wait in the vicinity of the barracks that is in Woolwich. Between us, we decided that the soldier is the most fair target because he joins the army with kind of an understanding that your life is at risk when you join the army, you know?
They also said that the reason why they remained at the scene was that they were hoping the police would kill them, clearly intending to be martyrs to their cause. Despite this, I don't know whether they did this as some sort of sick joke or something. The two actually pleaded not guilty at their trial.
Are you what? I've seen it all. I've seen it all. This is a first for me. I've actually seen it all now. It's the first time I've seen two guys stand around the body with the weapons that they used to take the man's life, run at police with the goals to die. When they don't die, when they're interrogated, they both confess to the murder, confess to why they did it, saying he was just the guy who's in the wrong place at the wrong time. Yet still, when they go to trial, they plead not guilty. This is a first for me.
In an ideal world, the judge and jury would have said in unison, "Bullshit," and they would have been sent down immediately. But of course, a full trial still had to go ahead. Naturally, the two were found guilty, with Michael Adbalajo being given a whole life sentence since he was considered the brains of the operation and the one who had gotten Adbawali into Al-Muhajirun in the first place, while Adbawali was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 45 years. Both men have appealed their sentences more than once and have been denied each time. They were prepared to die for their cause when they were free, but are apparently scared of prison life. That's interesting, isn't it? Michael Adbawali also wrote to Lee Rigby's family saying he was sorry and that he'd been brainwashed. They never responded to him, and Lee's mother has said that she doesn't care what excuse he has. After all that, the men have revealed themselves to be cowards who are pleading to be let out of prison and sending fake apologies to Lee Rigby's own family. As soon as their weapons are taken away and they can't hurt anyone, they become just another pair of spineless criminals. Michael Adbawali will be in his late 60s before he's finally eligible for parole, while Michael Adbalajo will rot in his prison cell where he belongs until the day he dies.
Good. They deserve to rot in prison. He absolutely deserves to rot in prison. Ladies and gentlemen, that is it for this reaction video. Let me know what you think about it. Let me know what you thought of these in the comments. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, comment what you think down below. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all for the next one.